Thank you very much, and we welcome you to our regular monthly board meeting. I'd like, before I call the meeting to order, to read our mission statement, which says, the Garrard County Board of Education is responsible stewards of resources entrusted to us, affirming the dignity and value of all children. Our community will provide all children an education which enables them to graduate college and career ready and to become successful, productive citizens in a global society. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and please note that all board members and the superintendent are present, and we welcome those of you that are joining us here in the boardroom and virtually as well. So if you would, join me just for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. If you would, stand and join me in our pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, and you may be seated. Item C is to adopt the agenda, and before we do that, we have one item to add on the action agenda. So,
thank you, Dr. Browning. I appreciate that. If you'll take a look at the action agenda on the back page, if you will go down to I, and we will insert a new I. That new I will be approved access control for Paint Lick Elementary, Camp Dick Robinson Elementary, and Garrard County High School. That will then shift the update from Sherman Carter Barnhart to J, the decision on construction managers to K, and the executive session to L.
okay, does everybody understand this addition? Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda with that addition?
I'd like motion to adopt the agenda with the addition of the 1 hour.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McQuarrie made the motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Davis seconded. Is there any questions or comments? All in favor, let me know by lifting hand. All board members were in favor. The agenda is adopted. Well, you know, we have had the practice of recognizing students of the month and teachers of the month. And tonight, we had a very special opportunity to honor and recognize those who have been recognizing all these students. And I think, Mr. Stubb, we only have one up here tonight.
Because they probably don't like being the ones who get recognized. That they prefer to be the ones doing the recognizing. But we are fortunate enough to have a whole lot of love here tonight. And they have been most gracious about supporting our Teacher of the Month. We greatly appreciate that opportunity that they've provided us. And if you all as a board would like to present that, we'd love for you to do that.
Okay. Y'all will come around and stand around. Yeah, we do appreciate you all so much. Thank you, and it's an honor to recognize you for all you've done for Garrard County and all these recognitions this past year.
Thank you, sir. One, two. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, and during the pandemic and the tough time for all the businesses, and us including being a small business, the school system really got behind us and supported us. And we still have our doors open today due to that. So I want to thank you all very much.
Thank you. The teacher appreciation meals had never been better.
Wow. Yes.
They were awesome. They were awesome.
So we would have also recognized a couple of other individuals tonight. We would have recognized also Farmers National Bank, because they're the ones who make possible the ability to recognize the students. And they confirmed for us that they wouldn't be here. That's fine. again, we appreciate them being willing to do that. And the third group that we would recognize was Garrard Central Rector. They honor our Teacher of the Year on a yearly basis. And again, we have individuals who'd rather recognize others than receive that recognition. But we want everyone here to know how much we appreciate what those folks have done. And we'll reach out to them again, and hopefully they'll continue that with us. And we're going to expand a little bit and do a couple of other things. And we look forward to continuing doing this, and maybe next year we'll be able to recognize them again. So,
Hope so. Item B is the site-based decision-making minutes, Mr. Stoll.
nothing for me to share there, other than you all have the opportunity to do that. You see all of the May meeting, and our groups are doing a great job of keeping us up to speed for you all to be able to see what's happening.
Item C is audience comments. Do we have anybody that wants to speak?
We did not receive any requests for that, so to my knowledge, we do not.
All right. Item D is board members.
So I think you may have jumped ahead.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
Or did I just, no, you're right, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying as close attention, so as far as I know, you didn't have anything there.
Okay, thank you. Well, I made a mistake last week.
So I guess that evens it out for us.
All right, E is superintendents.
So we've shared with you the changes for personnel since the June meeting. We also mentioned to you the other day, and you have laying on your desk tonight, the letter from KDE for annual determination. We're just providing that to you. You'll notice that it indicates that we've met the requirements, and you have great check marks on everything there. So again, congratulations to the special ed department under the direction of Wendy Congleton. But we know that this is not just recognition of Wendy, it's a recognition of our teachers, our aides who do some incredible work for us. So we just want to make sure that everyone is aware how well they have performed.
And I'd like to add, I was thrilled when I read this and we met all the expectations. There have been many years that was very difficult to meet some of these expectations. So, and I told Wendy the other night, it's excellent. Very proud of everyone involved in this.
They've done a great job, absolutely. We also tonight will hear the annual data security update. Chris Lane will be sharing that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so he can have access. And you have on your table a document that he'll be referring to, so if you want to grab a hold of that.
Let me go the other way. Yeah, there we go. Great. I just need to be able to see the screen so I can point the camera myself. So we're required to do a data security update with the board every year. Normally, the last several years we've done it in August, but it just says we have to do it before August. So I figure with this being a lighter month, we can cover it now. There's not a whole lot of guidelines on what we do for the security update. What I've always done is just kind of go through the security best practices guides from KDE and kind of just talk on what we do to complete those. So item 1, physical security of all of our data. So most everything we have sits over in the data center. Data center is a locked room within a locked building, so that's pretty good. We've also done some pretty good improvements with some of the locked projects, has helped that as well, as far as keeping server stacks and other just equipment safe. So that's been more on the physical side. Files, print, and web servers. KDE does all of the Windows patching. That's part of their system. And then we have a third-party application that manages the third-party applications. We have a third-party application to manage third-party applications, just to keep them up to date and free of security holes. Let's see, 2, unnecessary software. Most all of our servers are single, they're kind of one-trick ponies, so they're set up to do their one thing, or some of them do a few things, but they're set up to do their task, and that's it. Let's see. Keep all stuff separate. We turn off the services, so servers are in pretty good shape. Limited use. And actually, part of our ongoing efforts to improve our onboarding process and our offboarding process, we've gotten pretty good at, as new folks come in and as our folks leave us, keeping those accounts up to date, and also keeping, as they move around, updating what people have access to. Separate public-facing servers. We have very few internal public-facing servers. Most of our stuff has gone cloud-based over the years, which is security-wise, I think, advantageous for us, because that means that they're hosted by their respective manufacturers, and those manufacturers have assurances in place. And since they're the ones that write the program, are much better at keeping those services safe. Periodically check logs. That's one of my fun tasks, is looking at logs and looking at most of that I have automated. They show up, check them, make sure stuff is as it should. Desktop security, again, back to the third-party applications, are managed by a program we have on site. The Windows stuff is handled by KDE. Antivirus software, we use an antivirus software that is provided through a contract from KDE that's installed on all of our workstations and does a pretty good job. We check it periodically just to make sure what's coming up on it. Emails and attachments, that's always a fun one. Usually when there are new and exciting tricks and phishing attacks, I'll try to send something out to the staff, because that's that human element is always something to be a little concerned about, because some of these people, that's their full-time job, is trying to figure out how to trick people into giving them information they shouldn't. So we'll send out information to our staff periodically that says, hey, here's a new attack, or hey, remember, be careful sending these kind of information. Our switch last year from Microsoft to Google, both services do pretty well. I think Google does a little bit better job of flagging when there is a potential for somebody that's phishing. Accounts permissions, that kind of goes back to the same things on the servers. As people are coming and going, we've gotten pretty good at maintaining what they've got. We also go through with principals and administration and say, hey, just check through this list and make sure all of these people are actually still doing this task. And that's a couple of times a year, just going through, when we need to add and remove permissions. And the last one, I think one of the bigger ones, local administrator rights. The only people that do administrative work on the computers are being my technicians. So we're the ones set up as administrators. It does mean we have to do a little bit more as far as getting around to do installs and that kind of stuff. But it virtually eliminates several avenues of attack. So it's worth the minor inconvenience there. And then the last one was just updated at the very end of last year. We updated to KDE's new password policy, which is requiring a significantly longer password and a password reset, which we're got a lot of folks still getting used to, but it does provide that constant change. So in the event a password does get shared or does get, it will change shortly. So that is the best practices guide as far as that goes. We also do, there are other guys that we follow, and biggest one there is the data breach guide. We've been fortunate. We've not had a major data breach. Actually, we haven't really had a data breach since I've been here, and I'm not aware of one that we had before. So we've either been lucky or I'm not sure on that one. But I think we've done pretty well on that as well. So that is data security stuff. If you all anything else I can answer to or whatever.
Chris and his team do a great job. He has a small team to work with, but they do a tremendous job. When you think about what we had this past year, the fact that we had almost no glitching whatsoever, trying to operate in a totally virtual environment, and then doing synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid. Their group was really, really solid. And then when you consider how many more Chromebooks have been pushed out, a lot of Chris's time gets tied up in items like that, and they do a really, really great job. Sometimes I'm sure they get dinged because people want quick responses to things, but Chris does a great job of making sure that we're complying with what we're supposed to comply with. And I think some of what he said a second ago, maybe we've been lucky. It's not just being lucky, it's having somebody who pays attention and makes sure that we adhere to what we're supposed to adhere to. So we're fortunate to have him in that spot and for his crew to make sure that they do what they need to do to take care of it. So as much as this is him sharing information, I want you all to know how fortunate we are to have somebody who takes care of us in this area and keeps us from being in those spots. So kudos to Chris and his team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You run a tight ship? You run a tight ship?
Thank you.
All right, item number 3 is reports, and item A, number 3, is our treasurer's report, which Stacy's often shared with us. You want to speak to that?
I didn't really have anything to add to that. You all saw it the other night, so as long as you all were good with that and didn't have any questions. I would say that the other 2 reports, the bills as presented, we don't have any this time, and we still have not received an update from Garrard for the bonding potential, so I can't share anything with you on that.
All right, thank you. All right, item number 4 is the consent agenda.
You have approval of minutes from previous meetings. You had 3 meetings last month. You had the special session where you interviewed architects, the regular session, and the District Finance Corporation meeting. The treasurer's report that we just spoke about, we're also asking you to approve Red Book training through Ron Flannery, to approve our funding assurances for the 2021-2022 school year, and to approve the American Rescue Plan for ESSER 3 assurances as well.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lamb made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Hurt seconded. Any further comments or questions? All in favor, let it be known by lifted hand. All right, the consent agenda is approved. Item number 5 is the action agenda.
So the first item for that is we need an approval for the second reading of KSBA policy updates for this year. And I would recommend that you approve that second reading.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Hurt made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Mr. McQuarrie made the second. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, let it be known by lifted hand. All board members were in favor. The second reading is approved. Item B is to approve Head Start contract for 2021-22 school year. So,
Each year we need to come to an agreement with the Community Action Council for their work in the Head Start program, and the contract that they provided us this year is identical to the 2021 contract. So I would recommend approval of the CAC Head Start contract for the 21-22 school year.
okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the contract.
Okay, Dr. Lamb made the motion.
I'll second.
Ms. Davis seconded. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, let it be known by lifted hand. All board members were in favor. The Head Start contract is approved. Item C is to approve school calendar update.
When we asked you to approve the school calendar previously, we allowed something to sneak through. My responsibility to catch that, I missed it. We need to include the primary election in May on the 17th. We will not be in school on that day, so it moves our calendar completion back 1 day. It's a pretty insignificant change, but it's a change that we need to make sure our parents are aware of it up front. So I would recommend approval of this calendar amendment.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion?
Make the motion.
Mr. McQuarrie made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hurt second. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, let it be known by lifted hand. All board members were in favor. The calendar update is approved. Item D is to approve schools' master schedule times for 2021-22 school year. Mr. Stoll.
Each school year, we're required to make sure our students have access to 1,062 hours, and we confirm at the beginning of every year that our schools each meet that. We have no school that's under 1,072, so all of our schools meet that requirement. So I would recommend that you approve the school's master schedules for the 21-22 school year.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Dr. Lamb made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Davis seconded. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, let me know by lifted hand. All board members were in favor. The master schedules are approved. Item E is to approve pay application number 8 on the Garrard Middle School door project. Mr. Stoll.
This is the second part of the project. Initially, the project was an outside door fix. We added, did a change of order for this, and we have started to work on that, or they have started to work on that, and are now asking for their first payment connected to that, $11,850. This is work that's been completed. I'd recommend approval of pay application number 8 on the GMS door project.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Hurt made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. McCoy, second. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, let me know by lifted hand. And all board members were in favor. The pay application is approved. Item F is to approve use of emergency certified substitute teachers for the 2021-22 school year. Mr. Stoll.
In order to use substitutes who don't have teaching certification, we have to ask for your permission. KDE requires us to do that before we can use any of those folks. Obviously, with a shortage of subs, we could always fall into an area where we need to do this. So I would recommend that you approve the use of emergency certified substitute teachers for the 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion?
I move that we
Ms. Davis made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Corey made the second. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, let me know by lifted hand. All board members were in favor. Item F is approved. Item G is to approve a Medicaid coordinator position for the 2021-22 school year. Mr. Stoll.
In order for us to obtain reimbursement for Medicaid services, we need someone to supervise that. Based on some personnel changes that I've made, we need to return, or I'm asking you to return to a system that you had prior to last year, where we hire an individual on a $500 stipend to make sure that we meet all the requirements around the Medicaid reimbursement process. That would allow us to return some funds into special ed of about $13,000 by doing this. So it would be my recommendation that you approve this position and the accompanying stipend. We did attach a job description with that.
Thank you, sir. You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Hart made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Davis second. Any questions or comments?
I have some questions. Some questions. First of all, is this a redundancy? Because I've had the problem of making the figures match up. We established this position that's been done away with, which, I mean, well, it hadn't been done away with officially yet. I was board's on the one to do away with the position. But failure to fill it will cause it to become redundant, so we'll probably do that. But we were told in the previous meeting that we created a new position, that the funds for that position, to help fund that position, which would be slightly more than the position that was going to be opened up and cover the money would cover from a transfer. Well, I asked Friday for some figures on exactly how much slightly more was, and I haven't received them. I know that we have a significant amount of money out of our monies that we are in charge of that is for stipends, and I've voiced it before. My problem with just handing out stipends. I know that when you move duties around to save money and move personnel around, that's all in the superintendent's purview. We're talking about positions here. And this position seems to be funding 2 or 3 different things for more money in some places and no money in other places because duties are being moved to some people for an actual stipend and other people are assuming duties for no more money. And until I have a hard time going with approval of this, I would like to amend, I intend to try, if possible, to make a motion to table this for further discussion. Amend this motion and make it, table this for, make a motion to table this for further discussion until we get some figures.
You'd like to make a motion right now to table it for further discussion?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how the procedure is, whether we need to take a vote on the motion that's already been made and seconded to get to discussion to do that. So I don't know whether we need to vote yea or nay on the first motion and then make another motion to table it, however would be
I'm
appropriate
not
and
sure
correct.
myself, Mr. Phillips, how that's.
So I'm not sure that I know exactly. I think what you're doing is having a conversation right now connected to that other motion. And I'm not sure, and I'll look and see if anybody else out there has been a Robert's Rules person.
I think Robert Rules of
I
Order
know we
says that
table
you have
motions
to
before.
complete the motion that's on the floor.
Unless there's an amendment made to the motion that, and then we vote on the amendment. So
And-
he's amending the motion that's on the floor, asking that it be tabled until we acquire further.
Right.
So there needs to be a second to his friendly amendment.
Exactly what she said. That's what I.
So that's your motion.
Yes.
Okay,
So he's
all
making,
right, that makes more sense. Thank
Well,
you.
I wanted to make sure that it was worded correctly to do it properly.
Okay, and thank you, Dr. Lamb, appreciate
Dr.
that.
Lamb did an excellent job.
Okay, so you're making a motion to amend this motion to table it for further discussion. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So I think he's making a motion to amend
Yes.
that you vote on. And then would it be a motion to table? Or is the amendment the motion to table? That's where I'm not sure.
I'm
Motion to
understanding.
table.
The amendment could be the table.
Okay,
Yeah, that's my
We can vote
take.
on that.
okay.
Okay, you've heard Mr. McQuarrie's motion. Do I have a second? We don't have a second, so the motion dies. All right, we're back to the original motion. And we have a motion and a second to that motion. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, let me know by lifted hand. And 3, 4 were in favor and 1 opposed. All right, thank you, Mr. McQuarrie, I appreciate it. All right, let's see here. Item I was added, and I did not get to write all that down.
So I think we got to do H
Oh, H?
first.
Oh, we didn't do H. Thank you. See, I made another mistake.
So you and I are hand in hand today.
Are we even,
We're okay.
or am I hit it?
No, we're good.
Item H, please forgive me, is to approve individual instructional assistant with medical background for one-to-one assistance for a 6th grade student.
We have a 6th grade student who's going to be able to come back this year. We did confirm that this week to make sure that the plan is still to do that. But based on a recommendation from Vanderbilt University Medical Center, from his primary care physician, from our own nurse supervisor, and from the ARC, we need someone with medical background to be with him on a one-on-one basis. So we would recommend that we approve this position and provide that service.
Okay, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to.
Dr. Lamb made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Hurd seconded. Is there any further comment or any further questions?
Let me ask you a question. We kind of discussed this, that let's say in the worst case scenario, that something happens, that student cannot fill the year, and we have that teacher there, are we putting in that we're going to stay with the teacher for the rest of the year or terminate that? Or that should be a part of this as well?
So I believe with our conversation on Monday, it seemed that it was the board's wish that the contract would be allowed to run for the year. with the potential to reassign that individual. So that would be the way that we would do it, and if you want to include that in the motion, that would be fine, to make sure that it's a full-year contract with potential
I would
changes
like
to
to
duties.
include that into the motion.
Okay.
Dr. Land made the motion, would you include that?
Oh, I'm sorry, you made a motion.
Yeah, I understood it to be that way too. So we're gonna employ by contract, someone with medical background for this one student. But if the student ceases to attend the school, then the employee is allowed to continue in another assignment for the fulfillment of the contract.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, you'll second that amendment.
Second, yes, definitely.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, let me know by lifting your hand. All board members were in favor. The instructional system is approved. Now, item I.
So appreciate you all allowing us to add this in today. We had been planning to come to you in August with a request to do access control at Paint Lake Elementary, Camp Dick Robinson Elementary, and then to bring the high school online with the same process. The high school is a separate form for doing it. We like to make them all consistent. We had gathered an estimate of cost, and that estimate was just under $69,000. And we were going to be fine with doing that in August. However, we did a quick follow-up and found out that the price changes that are going to occur could negatively impact the district. And we were told that if we got this in place by basically the end of July, we would be allowed to keep the existing bid that we have. Without that, it's going to cost us about $34,000 more. So it's about a 50% increase. So what we thought we needed to do was get this in front of you all tonight, get your permission to do that so we can move forward with the projects. So I'm recommending that you all approve the access control for Paint Lake Elementary, CDR, and Garrard County High School in the amount of just under $69,000.
Okay, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
Make the motion.
All right, Mr. McQuarrie made the motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Davis made the second. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, let me know by lifting your hand. All board members were in favor. Item I is approved. Item J, update from Sherman Carter Barnhart.
Well, I appreciate, first off, I want to say on behalf of Sherman Carter Barnhart and all the design team and Allison and myself, Allison wanted to be here tonight, but she's covering another meeting. We really appreciate the opportunity. Talk to the engineers, CMTA engineers. We're going to utilize CMTA engineers for this project or some discussion. So everybody's poised and ready to go. If Mr. Stull can stop sharing for a moment, I'll bring up my screen.
I have stopped sharing.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Going to present. Okay. Hopefully this will come up. We tried it earlier and Chris got me set up, so I think it's going to.
You can look on yours.
It's not on mine.
It says it's sharing.
It's shared back here.
And it's one place.
I can't even see that.
No, we got to fix that. Chris, is there something I need to do differently?
It's behind you, Kevin. It's behind you.
I know, that's what, I've got it on my screen. So.
There you go.
Now you got it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so we're good, good. I got worried there for a moment. So, Mr. Stoll and I met a little while back, and I had, based upon a conversation, a meeting with him and saying, okay, what do we need to do? What's our next steps? I had prepared in my normal self a very detailed agenda. I'm not going to go through this entire agenda tonight, okay? It was more so that we could have a discussion of what was important here to get started, because really the next step in this process is to develop a BG1. And the reality is that there are some decisions that need to be made before we do a BG1. And one of those is actually, as you can see on this agenda here, if you can read that, I'll make it a little bit bigger so folks can see that, is the delivery method, construction delivery method. So What that does, how that impacts your BG1 is if you're wanting to go between, there's two viable approved KDE methods for construction by KDE. One is general construction and one is actually construction management method. I think you've had experience in both. The last few jobs we've done with you all have been general construction, but before that time, I think the original high school may have been construction management. So we wanted to talk about that, see which direction the board wants to go. And one of the things the superintendent had asked is that, could I share with you sort of just to start with, share the differences. So this screen that you see here is a graphic representation because you're not unlike every other district we do work with. It always comes up, which way do we want to go, general construction or construction management. Now, I'm going to zoom up on this. I see everybody trying to see the screens. So we'll take this up a little bit more, and that way you can, hopefully you can see that on your screen. And if not, I can zoom in even more. But when we look at general construction, one of the things to think about here, how does that work contractually, and how does that work with communication, and how does that impact your ability as a board to make decisions and stay informed, and how does that benefit not only the district, but how does that also benefit folks on your staff like Brad Abbey, you know, who's having to deal with these folks day in and day out during the construction, as well as Stacy and some of her clerical duties that she has, and she's not with us tonight. So in general construction, what you all as the owner do is that you hired us as your advocate. We work for you. We do not work for the contractor, nor do we work for the CM. We are always your advocate throughout either process. And that's the same in both processes. If you look at a general contractor, once the project's designed and we bid it, under general contractor, you will issue those bids out, public bids based upon KDE requirements, and you will receive bids. And you will select a contractor based upon an evaluated lowest and best bid. And that's the way the terminology reads. Now, what that means is that, let's say you've got a low bid, and you look at that bid and say, you know what, that contractor, and I've ran into this situation. We've checked their backgrounds, we've evaluated the bids, and we found something there that just is not comfortable. We would make a recommendation that the board take that under consideration and consider awarding to the next bidder. But I've got to have a legal justification to do that. In other words, I can't say it just because I don't like the guy, or I can't say it because, you know, I didn't like the color he painted his car, you know, whatever it may be. I got to have something substantial to do that with, and that is such things as we checked 3 references, and there were issues with the references. I can't get into specifics about what those references were, but I can get into that they were not very favorable references. You can take that into consideration. The one that the folks like when challenged the most, when it comes from a legal aspect, the attorneys love, is if it's a contractor that you had experience with and you don't like and had a lot of problems with. Brad can say we had him on 3 jobs and every job wasn't finished on time, you know, that sort of thing. Then you guys have that ability. That is the general contractor only, okay? Because that's the only person you've got a contract with. Now with that, if you notice here, I've got single bonding for all work. Kentucky requires that the contractor carries a bond. He has to be bondable for the value of the project. And that is a bond that's carried by the general contractor, and that's where it stops. He bonds everybody else underneath him for the value of the work. What does that mean? So if you see here, this is a rough idea of all the different branches of work, the subcontractors that may work underneath the general contractor. They do not have any agreement with the board at all. They do not have any, we do not, as a board, you would not have any recourse to say, well, we don't like so-and-so as a roofing contractor. We do up front, if they list them, we've got the ability to say, hey, you know, we got an issue with this board member, can you change at the same price? And they may be able to do that, they may not, because they bid it on the apparent low bid. So the contractors go through and they'll evaluate whoever's lowest, and they may say, we don't want that, we're going to pay more to get a contractor we like, and we're not going to take that low bid, but they do that evaluation, we don't. So we don't know who we get until we get those bids open to get awarded. So those contracts are all with that general contractor. Those contractors may not be bondable, okay? They don't have to have a bond because the general contractor's bonded. So what that does in some cases, especially right now, what we're seeing in this current marketplace, Talked to a contractor a little while back, a project had bid. It was not one of my jobs. He was sharing with me that they only had one electrical contractor show up on bid day. And it was a CM job, a construction management job. And I said, well, where were all the other bidders? They said, well, because in a CM job, it's different. Every one of those subcontractors must be bonded. And there was, because of the increase in inflation in electrical cost, conduit's gone up, PVC's gone up, devices have gone up. When that number went up, that put a lot of those contractors that were local out of the ability to bond the project. So they were not able to bid. So in this scenario, these subcontractors don't have to be bonded. So it does open the door potentially for some smaller contractors. Now, I would want to vet those. You know, I will look at the list of those and see if there's somebody we've had problems with, and I'll have a conversation with the general contractor. So that's that portion. Now, communication-wise, what happens here is that, as you know, I am qualification-based for your being your advocate. The contract with the owner is only with, you only have one contract, which makes it pretty easy on Stacy. There's only one pay application to review each month. But if that contractor, and I'm trying to give you a good grasp of what can happen in these scenarios, if that general contractor bills for the work but doesn't pay those subs, they don't file a lien against the general contractor. For some reason, they think they can file a lien against the district. They can't do that legally, but they'll be called Mr. Stahl. Mr. Stahl's going to say, hey, we paid the general contractor. It's between you and the general contractor. There's nothing we can do to help it. So there's some things there that general contractor is responsible to do. And if you've got a subcontractor, let's say it's Acme, and Acme is a good contractor for the district that is a subcontractor, and he's not getting paid, kind of hurts your relationship if that's somebody you use locally. You know, hey, we paid him, I can't help you out here. You know, the architect sent in the pay application, he approved it. You know, you're going to have to take it up with them. So that's something different there, that under a CM, all of your checks will be written directly to those contractors, so you know they are going to the contractors. They don't pass through the CM. CM looks at them, he approves them, but he's not writing the checks. The district's writing the check for payment. So you go from one pay application in one contract to 15 different contracts and 15 different pay applications. So there is an increase in the amount of work there, right? The biggest difference here in general construction is typically those contractors want to be, the general contractor wants to be competitive, so that general contractor is going to take the lowest bid so he can get the work. What we see a lot of times in the marketplace also is sometimes they will, we tell them to list their subcontractors, but there's another group of subcontractors below those subcontractors. And you just don't know how far down the ladder goes, but sometimes they'll shop things, and it just happens. So we try to avoid that, but there is that, you do not know that you're getting the best contractor, you know that you're getting, we assume, the lowest value because he's the lowest bid, okay? Any questions about that? On the general construction side, any questions about general contractor first? Think you all understand that pretty well? Good. Now, let's talk about general trade scope, all right? These are the things that a general contractor will do on a site to manage your project as they're working through. That would be a job site superintendent that works for the contractor. That would be job site trailers, security fencing, access control, maintaining the site, soliciting the bids from the subcontractors, getting those bids. He manages those subcontractors himself, and he oversees and he coordinates that work himself. So he's doing all of that within his trade, right? When we go over to construction management method, the model changes somewhat. So keep that in mind because I'm going to bring that back up here shortly. In a construction management version, you as an owner solicit the architect, which you've already done, and the architect can assist you in selection of a construction manager if you wish. Now, what a construction manager does is he comes on board from day one. In the general contractor role, the general contractor normally has not seen the plans, is not made aware of any of the decisions in the process until he picks up a roll of plans 4 weeks prior to bidding. And everybody knows they normally don't pick them up 4 weeks prior. They usually wait till 2 weeks prior. That's the first time they've seen the set of plans, so they don't know the background behind the decisions. In a construction management, what you're doing is you're hiring somebody to take on those general trades roles, those roles of managing the job site, managing the subs, but he also is involved in the design aspect. A good CM will be by your architect's side. We work it together. And as we're going forward, he's responsible for seeing that your schedule's maintained. He's seeing responsibility for your budget's maintained. Now, I do that in a general construction method. We do that, and we do that also. But in this manner, you've got two people doing that. You've got two sets of eyes. We're looking at the cost opinion. They're doing the cost opinion. He's got his hand on the market, and he's doing a cost opinion at the same time we are, and we come to some sort of consensus of where the market's going. He also is looking at the design. So if I go out there and your architect, as the firm is, and I'm an educational facility planner, but as Sherman Carter Barnhart goes out there and we go in that gym and we specify a product that CM knows is no longer available, or he says, wait a minute, that's going to cost us a little bit more to install. You might want to consider this. We get the benefit of that during design to make that adjustment so that we can get that built into the pricing. So there is some benefit to that upfront work that he is doing, and he does that, but he also takes on all the construction, and he's acting as your advocate on that job site. He works directly for you. The general contractor is working for himself. The CM is working for you, and you get to select who that guy is on the job site, just like you select the Sherman Carter Barnhart. You're able to interview and select and get the right team that you want for your job site, and you're not subject to the low bidder in a general construction method. Okay? So that's where that falls. Now, they may or may not bid the general construction portion of that. There's still some general construction that is in a CM project, and they may self-perform or they may not. And people say, well, you want a CM that doesn't do that. Well, I've worked both ways, and we can get into the pros and cons if you decide you want to look farther into CM. But typically, you'll see both doing it. Some do, some don't. It depends upon which CM you hire. And it's a conversation that I recommend you have with your CM up front. What is their intent? So are you going to bid some of this work also? But you're looking at the possibility of here. The reason why we see people go with CMs when they choose that method, they're looking to get somebody that will be their advocate from day one on that job site, day in and day out, to be their eyes and ears 24/7. Look out for your interests. Now, how do the contracts work? Again, they've got a contract with you. When all the work's bid and all the prime contractors are in there, you are getting the lowest and best evaluated bid for each bid package. How does that work? Well, that means that if we were looking here and we opened up bids and we had 30 different bids for this, and we look at it and we say, you know what, we like all these bidders, but we've got a problem with this one. It's easier to deal with that one bid, and you can go ahead and award all the other packages. And you can rebid just that one package if you need to, because you just don't like the outcome of that bid. Or if you have a reason to reject that, like you did the GC, you can reject just that bid package and then go with the next bidder. So that's some of that at that point. So the flexibility there, you got individual contractors. Each contractor is bonded for the full value of their work. So you don't have to worry about the level of the contractor. Can they do the work or not work? If they're bonded, they're able to do that work. And again, it's selection by the lowest and best bid on those lower bid packages. Communication in the general construction method. When I've got an issue, as your advocate, I go to the general contractor and have that discussion. And I bring that up to that and say, I'm having the problem with this sub. I can talk to him in the field, but I've always got to go through that general contractor because he's the one your contract's with. I can't go out and hold money on that guy. I've got to hold money on the general contractor to make things happen. With a CM, I have a conversation with the CM, and then I have a conversation with those individual subs, and I can cut that pay application as related to just that sub. So it gives me a little bit more flexibility, and you have flexibility as a board to address problems within the contractors that are doing the work, as opposed to just the management side of it being a general contractor. Both methods are successful, okay? Both of them work well, and I know that you all need to make a decision to which way you want to go. So what I wanted to do was start out here to make sure everybody's got a good idea and a concept of the differences. And then we can have a discussion of which way you all want to proceed. Because again, we're your advocate. We'll help you whichever way you want to go. Because that is sort of the hinge point of getting that BG1, one of the hinge points to getting that BG1 underway. Because KD wants to know If it's going to be CM, we would need to go into a process to select a CM. Any questions about the differences in the two? It's a lot of information. This is where, you know, I'm your advocate, so, you know, blow away with the questions because I want to make sure you're comfortable with whichever method you all decide to use.
Let's start with the ladies.
Sure.
Ms. Davis, you got the floor.
Oh, gee. Well, I had one question. I think you've answered it because we were going to attend a session at the conference on it and it concerned the low bid. So for some reason I had in my mind after looking at this, that with the construction manager, that the low bid was always taken. But what you're saying is it's taken, but it has to be the best value. So you really wouldn't have to take it.
That's right. Now, are you talking about for the CM's work or for just the contractors below?
The contractors.
Okay, yes, you're correct. The contractors below, you don't always, in a general construction, it's more, in a general construction, if I see a listed subcontractor, I'm going to go to the contractor and say, hey, you know, that sub I've had some issues with, can you change him? He's going to have to go back to his other bidders and say, can you do it for the same amount? Or he's going to say, no, I can't do it. He listed them because of that reason. Sometimes we've had that with like a glazing contractor and go back and say, you know, we've had some problems with that. Is that really who you want to use? And he said, well, let me see what I can do. And then he's changed it. Now that legally is between him and his subs because he doesn't have a contract with anybody. So how he does that, you know, a lot of times they'll say, well, I'll take it out of my package and I'll pay the difference, you know, and just go on and do it for the same price. But yes, more often than not in a general construction, you're accepting those contractors as they are. In a CM, you've got the ability, you've got some tools there that you evaluate each one on the lowest and best for those packages. And if you're unhappy with who that is, you've got an opportunity to move to a different sub, or you can say, let's rebid that package.
Just have had some negative experiences with low bids. They're not always,
Yes.
because they are low,
Yeah.
they don't always do their homework.
Mhm.
And so that was a concern.
Well, and let me talk about that homework because I just got into this with another district. We took a district, they did a CM method and they had actually it was a GC. No, it was CM. And they had a package that came in and they told me, Kevin, because the CM bid a portion of the work, he couldn't evaluate it. It was, you know, that'd be unethical for him to evaluate the own bid. So he backed out, kind of rescinded himself and said, look, since he's low, you need to be evaluating. And the owner said, Kevin, and I would anyway. He said, we're really going to rely on you to evaluate this. I made my phone calls, did all the phone calls, did all the background checks, heard a lot of positives, but as I began to peel the layers of the onion off and begin to really check into those, they weren't so good. And the board literally paid more money to get the guy that they wanted to do it because they knew they had an experience with him. And it wasn't, the attorney had no problem because it was all shown as to why they were able to do that. And then move forward.
But if the low bid did not do as they should have, they were going to be out extra money anyway. And that's the
Exactly.
experience that,
Exactly.
the big experience that I remember, they took the low bid, but they ended up having to pay the difference. So
And the lowest and the best value is what you want to do. And you're really going to rely in either of these situations on your advocate to evaluate those in detail. And we call up not just the listed references. I call up other architects. I call up other, you know, projects they've worked on. And try to do my best because ultimately, if I get a bad sub, you know, it's not only bad on you, it's bad on me. I've got a lot more work after. A lot more work.
Ms. Davis, have you formed an opinion as to a preference, whether to go with the general contractor or construction
well, I'm
manager?
open-minded tonight. I want us to discuss it. I want to hear the pros and cons. Having had the experience of working with the construction, the general contractor, we built Hayden Elementary, I have that to fall upon. But, so I haven't, if I'm using my terms correctly, we haven't worked with the construction manager. That's when I say that right. Right.
So we've done, the last time a construction manager was used, I believe, was a bicycle.
That's good.
Yeah, so I had, we had someone on site and of course we weren't on site at England, so that made a difference,
Yeah.
but in the meetings, we worked with them. But I know some of the repercussions of always taking low bids and it wasn't always the ideal situation. So I'm open-minded tonight. I want to hear what others think. I'll definitely take into consideration my experiences, but
Good.
we'd be glad to work with the board and what we agree with, that we think is best for us in this particular situation.
Let me ask this question. You've been on the board a long time, Have you all worked with, do you all have, I'm trying to pick your all brains too. And then I'll ask you basically the same question. Do you have a preference? And if so, why?
Okay, that's what I want to hear from you all, and I'm going to share here in just a little bit.
But I asked you first. Using your wisdom. I mean, you've worked with them before.
Well, I've come to conclude, I prefer the general contractor scenario, me personally. For one thing, and I don't know if you recall, when we interviewed the architects, I asked this question about if we could use a purchase order method to save money on taxes.
We can do that in both methods. Yes, sir.
In both methods. Okay.
Both methods.
All right, good. And, but there was just one, that we interviewed that said, no, we couldn't. I can't remember exactly which one that, but we won't go there. But it's my personal opinion, and I'll go along with what the majority of the board wants to do. If you want to go with general contractor, or if you want to go with construction manager. But what I wanted tonight was to hear your opinions on that. For one thing, if we go with the construction manager, we've got several steps we've got to go through before we can even do a BG1. Is that correct?
Yes, what you would do, and what we've done in, and if you want to talk, if any of the board wants to contact Powell County, for instance, okay? They went through this process. They had a CM, they had a bad experience with CM. And they decided, because the superintendent there had good experience with CM work, he would like to go forward with it. He said, okay, fine. If you want to move forward with it, and we gave this exact same presentation. End of the day, their choice to go to CM was based upon, they wanted to know who was working for them as their advocate, just like the architect was. They wanted to handpick those guys, Mr. Browning. That's basically what they wanted to do. So I said, okay, and they looked to me, and again, as you were going to look to me for my opinion, said, what do you think? And I said, well, if you're going to go down that road, I think what you need to do is make sure you hire and select from a well-educated standpoint. By that mean is not just hire a CM, but find out, do our homework, talk to other districts that have used that CM, and then look at and ask and request that they bring in the full team. Okay, what I mean by the full team is in a CM, it's not just the job site superintendent, there's a project manager. He's the one that gets things done. The job site superintendent is just watching the work that goes on. Both of those two guys are very important, but the one that really gets the things done is that project manager. You want the bulldog in the room, okay, to manage those subs, because he's going to manage each sub on your behalf. You also want to talk to them about who is their finance person. How good are they with the KDE process? So there's a list and a myriad of questions that I developed for them, and they went through and asked those, and they did exactly, they took my advice. So when the interview occurred, it wasn't just one or two people. The room was full of all their team, and they had heart-to-heart conversations about how they worked and operated so they could get to know them. At the end of the day, they chose a CM that I didn't think they would choose because it was the CM they had a bad experience with. And then, we couldn't figure out, I was kind of shocked by that. And I talked to the board member, and she said, that's not the same team we have. He said, if we get that team, I can tell by the way they talk, there's a bulldog in the room, and I know what they're doing. And they kept the person quiet that needed to be quiet, was there just because, for whatever reason. But anyway, I won't get into that. But I can do the same process with you all if you want to. That's the only reason why I see a lot of districts go to that process. We've done them all. And you ask about what my preference is? We're successful in all of it. It's more important as to what you as a board are comfortable with, because just like this relationship that we've developed, you got to be comfortable with who you're working with and how you're going to handle it. So we'll see you through to a successful project. There may be hiccups and roadblocks and things we have to hurdle, some obstacles, but that's what you paid me for, was to be your advocate.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, go back and ask questions, seems to be the elephant in the room.
Sure.
The construction manager works for free, doesn't
So, okay, I'm glad you said that, because you remember what I said about the portion of work that the general contractor does, that the CM does? I cannot quantify and have been unable to quantify, nor will I ever be able to quantify it. A CM gets a fee. KDE says that when determining what your construction cost is for fees, you have to consider not only your construction, but you have to consider the CM fee as part of the total construction cost. The reason being, a lot of those responsibilities that a general contractor does, he's no longer doing, so his price goes down if he's bidding general trades, and the CM's price goes into that spot. Are they equal? Mike, I couldn't tell you if they're equal, but there is an additional fee. But the argument that they will make, and I think that's the question you need to ask the CMs if you get to that point, why am I paying your fee? How are you going to save me money? And they can answer for you what their purpose is for that.
Generally, they'll tell you they're saving you sales tax.
And that is not everything.
Exactly.
Sales tax, I can save you sales tax. And we are one of the ones that sort of pioneered that with KDE and Mark Riles years ago. Is, Mark, you're letting them do it, we need to be able to do it. And he found a way within there that we could do it, and we helped write some of that language. So, sales tax, I'll get you the sales tax.
If my memory serves me correct, it was a certain percentage of the construction.
It is. It is.
It's
Like
table.
that percentage of $10 million.
Yes.
7% or something like that?
Yeah, and it varies, and there's management fee on top of that, Mr. Browning.
Yes, I know.
So you're talking about an insignificant amount of money going to the construction manager, on top of the architect, on top of the general contractor.
Not on top of the general contractor.
The general contractor's gonna get his,
He's going to get his share on his bid portion,
exactly.
okay?
But it's still a share that's gonna be a cost to the district as far as the
Right.
total project cost.
I guess, let me try to explain it in a way that
It's just bottom dollar.
it is. It's bottom dollar. It's bottom dollar. Exactly. You're right.
Project cost, bids cost so much.
Mhm.
General contractor, part of that bid, and that his cost and his profit or his. what
His
he
portion.
business, his portion is added to that cost.
Right.
Then your cost for all your
Yep.
work and everything you do, that's added on to the total cost above the bid price.
Mhm.
And then the GC
The CM,
is tacked onto that.
Right.
So you got, and it will total up, looking at the amount of money spent, a considerable amount of money.
yes.
Now.
Now, is it a considerable
in
amount in
in
total?
all- And as far as each part individually, it'll be, it won't be as much of a amount of money, but it's still significant.
Okay,
And are you gaining anything by having the GC compared as far as money and the total cost of the project? Are you gaining anything from having him above his cost? Or are you just spending a little more money so that you've got another set of eyes, or maybe not a little bit of money, a considerable amount of money, to have another set of eyes to be able to, within reason, pick some people, and then you've got to figure out which construction manager you want. And I can tell you, I've talked to several districts and had experiences with 2 or 3 on jobs. From my first round on the school board and my stint in the sheriff's office and the judicial center that was built in construction manager. And about 3 different companies that I would not, if I was building a building for myself, I would not hire them.
understand.
But, that's a relative decision, and like you said, boards have problems with it one time and not a bit of problem next time. I don't know what to tell you. I kind of lean to Mr. Browning's point of view right now, but like I said, it's going to be a board decision.
Yeah.
And
Well,
whatever the majority of the board wants, I will support.
And If it was 7%, which I just pulled that number out of the air, I can't remember exactly what ours was.
According to this, on our paper right here, if it's $15 to $20 million, the project, it's 1.95%. Is that what I'm reading
For a construction manager,
for construction manager?
okay, well, will that be less than $600,000?
So to me, I was trying to figure that'd be, just under $400,000.
Or that,
Over 400,000, not spent on one.
I'm just coming up with a figure.
Needs.
Understand what you're talking about, value.
Or how would it benefit us to go ahead and not do something we could do to pay them? So it's a point of how you look at
The
it.
thing that I liked about what you said relative to the construction manager is that I guess I'm always under the assumption that more heads are better than one. With the idea of the collaboration between the architect and the construction manager, and one seeing something the other doesn't see, and working things out for the best case scenario for the project itself. I guess that's the thing that kind of stands out at me. It's a kind of a point there, a point well taken there of the money value that could be used if we didn't have it. It's very discussable.
Plus who you choose could either stand it, could hinder the project or
There you go.
help the project.
I don't try
Some
to,
construction managers can be a little, that I've had experience with, could not get along with some general contractors. So you can have a conflict between and it should be a marriage of architect, district, construction manager, and general contractor. If you can, the perfect scenario is, if you can get all four, you're great. But if something's misfiring, it's like on a 4-cylinder car. If one misfiring, it's a big difference. One misfiring on an 8-cylinder is not as hard as that. So,
See,
it's just
one of the things too that sticks out at me is that your company was hired.
Mhm.
Because of the confidence we had in your company relative to anyone else. And that doesn't mean they weren't bad companies or anything like that. We just figured, we thought you were the best of the best.
I appreciate that.
So therefore, we would want to display that confidence in your company to lead us in that direction and to make sure that we didn't have bad directions, whatever, along the way. And I think each one of us would want to, and Mr. Stoll, same way, and I think when we had the experience at the high school on remodeling, we had some ideas, I think, that were not necessarily looked at. And I think that if we have ideas and so forth with the board, that we need to share it with you guys and develop the worth of, is that practical? I don't think we want to lose control, but we don't want to be out there watching everything that's going on, which we may be doing anyway, you know what I'm saying? Because we're interested
Well,
in
Saturday
it.
mornings we're supposed to be, right?
So it's a tough decision, very tough
So,
decision.
yeah, I appreciate you trying to explain the differences to us, but one of the questions that I have is, which of the two gives us the greatest level of accountability? Because I think, to me, this seems like it's a major undertaking for our district, and it's really an important point in it's a really important time for us right now.
That's right.
And so we don't want to make a mistake. So which of the two options give us the greatest degree of accountability for those projects to get completed in a fiscally responsible way and also in a timely manner and done in the way that we know our people on the ground who are going to be operating in those facilities have an input? So which of those two are going to give us the greatest degree of accountability?
When you talk about accountability, and I'm always interested in hearing in your mind what accountability means.
So it wouldn't, so I was-
Mr. McQuarrie's wanted to know who's going to get called to the mat. And for me, from my perspective, ultimately, I'm the guy, okay? When I get into general construction, it's gonna be my job to push that contractor. And the only stick I've got is payment. That's all I got is payment. And if that contractor is busy and he put enough liquidated damages in there and says, I planned on going over 6 months anyway, so I'm gonna laugh when you say you're gonna charge me money. So it's gonna be real responsible of me to have to look at that and make sure the pay applications are reviewed in a timely manner and the work completed is in compliance with the contract documents before we pay them. And we got to make sure that they're where they say they are on their schedule. That is the accountability that I have to do for you all in that venue, okay? Now, in a CM, I'm doing all that same role anyway, because I won't authorize payment until I get a pay application that's signed off by that CM that has also done that work. So if you're talking about accountability, and I'm just going to use this as an example, let's say the work got through the CM. And he has said, oh, yeah, that's good. You can pay him $150,000. And I catch it, and I say, no, you can't. He's only got $75,000 worth of work done. We're not paying him that much. You got two sets of eyes to catch him. But you're right. You've got to have the right CM for that to work. You've got to make sure you've got somebody that you can trust and navigate. So in that situation, accountability is, I'm an old country boy. When the gate breaks, whose job was it to make sure the gate was working? Okay. My job is to make sure I'm going to be accountable no matter what method you choose. So I told the last district, I had a conversation the other day with the district, and same conversation, their board said, we're going to let the superintendent, and they said, we don't want to have it, we've done them both ways in this district, whatever you all want to make it good for you, your maintenance director, your finance guy. Had the same conversation, and they said, you know what, we really like having somebody on that site, because Kevin, we know that you only are here for periodic visits. In a day that's 24 hours long, you're there for a half a day or a day, and you may be there 3 times a week or 4 times a week, but you're not there every single day. We can't have our guy out there every single day, and our guy isn't experienced enough to know that that rebar is going in right, or this is being done right, and if it gets covered up, he won't know. But if we've got somebody out there managing the work for you, now your value, I get it wholeheartedly. Is it more money? What they will tell you, if we set the CMs down, what they're going to say is we're going to save you money because we're coordinating the work ahead of time. We've been involved. We've saved you money throughout the process by saying, don't do that, architect, or do this and make the schedule better. Look at the phasing of how this is going to be added on, when this work's going to be done. They've planned it from day one. They say they're going to save you money. Can I prove it? Can't prove it. I only had one job in the state that I did that I actually bid them side by side. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity. I've never had an opportunity to do this. We bid at CM. It came in over budget. The superintendent turned to me and said, there's 3 elementary schools we were doing at one time. He said, Kevin, what can we do? And I said, he says, what are you hearing? If it came in over budget, what are they telling you? Well, all the subcontractors in that area didn't want to work for a CM. They decided they weren't going to bid it, and if they were going to bid it, they were going to make a boatload of money. So they were trying to run the CM out of that end of the state. So what ended up happening, we rebid it again, and I thought, okay, now we're going to get real numbers. I didn't get real numbers because the CM asked the superintendent, and he wasn't aware of what was going to happen. He wanted to rebid it also. So when he rebid it also, he made sure that his numbers went down. I don't know how that happened, but they ended up going CM based upon that. And it was a CM job. It's successful. But I never have been able to get what you're asking for. What is the true number? Are they really saving money? Are they not saving money? I don't know. Most districts are willing to get that upfront, what you're saying, accountability or that second set of eyes. Laurel County does every single job, and they always will do every single job as CM.
Boyle County have a construction manager.
Who?
Did Boyle have?
No, Laurel. Okay, I've not worked in board.
Okay, let me ask you this, if I have this right, but I'm gonna look at this, so I got to depend on you.
That's what I'm here for.
If you have a construction manager, he's gonna have a project manager. Does that come under, I mean, if he's gonna have somebody out there all the time?
He's gonna have a job site superintendent
That's what I
that's
meant.
out there 24/7. And he's also gonna have a project manager that's out there whenever I'm out there, for the most part.
Now, if you have a general contractor, what comes under him?
He's got a job site superintendent as well.
Well, one thing we've got going for us,
We got Brad Abbey.
that plus Kevin lives here in the county and we know where he lives.
That's right. Everybody knows where I live, out at Camp Dick. Come see me anytime. Says Chief Lane, right on the road.
Signs off on the punch list.
Who signs off on the punch list? I do.
Exactly.
Now, in a,
Contract, does the construction manager sign off on it?
we require that the construction manager, because of that reason, I require that the construction manager perform his own checklist and his own punch list prior to me ever setting. I am very irritated and will be very, you can see my temperature's getting up, so I need to calm down. I get very discouraged when I have a CM that does not do his work. And his work is to work for you all. And if I'm out there working hard from Cheek Lane out there on, off of Cleo Avenue, and I'm making that effort, I expect him to make the same effort because he's getting paid a fee. And if he isn't, I usually have a conversation with somebody that will bring it to his attention. Because it shouldn't be harder for me, if I've got somebody doing their job, it should be a cooperation. Everybody should benefit from it.
I think it's also important for us to remember that we've talked many times about the complexity of the work that Brad does. And so I don't want to overload him with so much responsibility that he's not able to do the job that he's got currently and supervise these new building projects. That won't work, in my opinion. We can't expect Brad to be able to do that. So I want to be very careful not to create a situation here. I mean, we trust him, we know he's great, he does a phenomenal job with the tasks that he's been assigned to do. But how much more can we put on his plate and expect him to be able to do? I mean, that just seems unfair and unreasonable as a board to expect him to be able to supervise these projects too.
So what are you saying, that you're leaning because of those things that you just shared for the construction manager?
I'm not leaning in any direction yet.
Oh.
Let me ask one thing I failed to ask, at this point, I asked everybody else again. Let me ask Mr. Stoll.
So I don't have a lot of experience with this, so I'm not sure that I'm the expert. I've listened tonight. Here's what I think I've heard. I think I heard you say that if you use the GC, you're gonna have less pay apps. We don't have to have subs who have bonding, so that could expand the options of people who can work for us in that environment. If we go to the construction management side, we probably have a little bit more flexibility, and we have contracts with everyone, which means that if we didn't like a bid package, we can isolate that one out and move forward with everything else, but we still have to deal with that. So when I've listened, I think those were the positive pieces that I pulled out on each of those components. And if you pull those out, I'm not 100% sure, having not lived through this, which one of those gives you the biggest bang for the buck. Is it more important to have a lot of people who could potentially bid as a subcontractor, and maybe you keep those numbers down to try to avoid that situation that we were talking about earlier where people said they weren't going to bid? Maybe it's not because they're trying to run somebody out, but because they couldn't afford to. Kevin shared that at the beginning. So if you were in the CM side, you might push some people out who wouldn't be able to because of the bonding side of it. Or does that flexibility that you have to be able to pick and choose some things outweigh what you would get with the general contractor? But one thing I did think that I heard through all of this is that Kevin has said he's accountable for all of this. Didn't really matter which way you did. Didn't you all hear the same thing?
Pretty much heard it.
I mean, I'm the one that's gonna be here for the next 40 years, okay? So, ultimately, I'm gonna have to hear about it, and it's my community.
So the reason I point that out is that that may give you a little bit of comfort in knowing whichever direction you go. The one thing that I do think I heard also, it sounds like I'm leaning away, and I don't mean to sound that way, was that if you have a good construction manager, it makes things really, really good. If you have a bad one, it makes things really, really bad. And when I think about it from my limited perspective, I've only dealt with one process, really, in a significant project. And so that automatically gives me, I don't know if the word is bias, but it gives me a cautionary feeling about going a certain route. But I can't stack it against something else because I've not had it the other way. So when I tell you that, I'm not saying any of that to try to guide, because I just don't have a history with that. I think you just have to try to figure out, if you were weighing it, which one tips the scale. Again, is it more flexibility or less pay, less bonding requirements over here, or the flexibility piece over here where you can pick and choose a little more easily than you could have over here? And it's return on investment, and you don't have anything to stack that against.
So you're gonna be like Dr. Lamb and Miss Davis, you're not gonna.
So I'm not gonna be like any of you, because I don't get to vote.
I know.
So I've told you plenty of times you can throw me
No,
under the
I know
bus
you
on
can't
something,
vote,
but
but
I can't get under the bus.
Is there in the process, let's say we get out of the gates and all of a sudden in the first month and a half, this construction manager just isn't getting it done? Is there anything in that contract that gives us ability to terminate that and go in a different direction?
I would have to pull, because I'm not a CM, I would have to pull a CM contract and see if there is any provisions, but they're gonna have to be, from my experience, pretty severe. Now, I will tell you, it's gonna be pretty difficult, but I will tell you this. I did have that a situation in Floyd County on a high school once. And in that process, we kept having a problem with a particular project manager. They couldn't keep a project manager on the job from the CM side. And the owner finally said, enough's enough. And they got their best of their bulldog. You know, that's why I say it's important to know whoever we do, whichever way we go. If you go GC, you're not going to know who you got until you get the bids in. And hope we get, and I'm not trying to sell either way, because I can't. That's not my purpose. My purpose is to make sure you all got all the information, because one of the things I didn't hear said in your summary, ultimately the general contractor is responsible for getting those guys organized and keeping them on schedule also. You know, he's the one that's got the dollars. You've got a contract with him. So if you get the wrong GC, everything's going to be a nightmare from day one out of the gate, and you're already in contract with him.
Can I ask you a question about that? You could do a hiring process with the CM. Is that correct?
You can do a hiring process just like you did with the architect. What we would do, or what you all as a board would do, say, we want to talk to guys, you know, if that's what you want to do, talk to them and just see. Get letters of interest and do interviews, but I would give you some recommendations on how and the format of those. Because I think it's really important, if you're going to go down that road, you're getting ready to marry these guys, and they're going to be on that job site for 2 years, or whatever that time frame is. Let's make sure we know what we're getting in bed with.
On the GC side,
Hope show.
on the GC side,
On some pretty good shows.
You got to get through the magic and mirrors.
on the GC side, you don't have the opportunity to do that process. You put a bid out,
Mhm.
and you, I think in your display though, it's best with some criteria.
Lowest and bid, lowest and best bid, evaluated bid. Lowest and best evaluated bid.
So that doesn't mean that if you had a GC bid that was the lowest, that necessarily means it's the one you have to take. You may not have flexibility to go through 3 of them to get to the one that you thought you wanted.
Right.
But you could look at that one to determine whether or not that one really fit based on the research that you do on.
Based upon
individual
calling your
customers.
references and doing the background checks and seeing what their history is. We could even go to the point of saying, okay, we want to bring in your job site superintendent for evaluation. We want to know the guy you got. How long has he been with your company? Did you just hire him because you got all these jobs and you found somebody out here without work who was a retired guy or whatever, and you brought him on the site and he hasn't worked for 5 years, or a new guy that's never managed a job, we could evaluate
So the
those.
CM can investigate beforehand, on the GC, it's kind of after,
After the fact of the bid's received.
proactive or reactive.
And then you want to review with your attorney when you decide you're not going to take that. I always strongly suggest you review that with your attorney first, because it can be challenged. Going through professional services underneath the CM, there's no challenge to that. You've evaluated who you want to get. But you're still subject to those low bids, guys, when you bid says packages. You're back to the same square one. But I can do the same thing in the CM on each individual package.
Is anything that's been discussed caused any board members to tilt one way or another? I've told you where I stand.
I'd like some clarification. I think I was using my terms backwards a while ago. So in prior projects in Garrard County, have we not always used the construction management there? We've always had someone on site with a trailer or what, and that's construction management. Right?
No, everybody will have a job site trailer regardless of being,
So I guess, so I'm trying to say, is there any project that we have used a general contractor as opposed to construction management, or vice versa?
I believe the only construction manager, I've been on the board, I don't know, 17 years, was when we built the new high school.
Construction manager,
Construction manager.
construction manager, we had one of the first
It's alliance.
when we built
What is
this building.
We get alliance, is that
Oh, for
construction
year
management
two?
company?
Had a very good one.
I don't,
Alliance.
Yeah, I
There was,
think the
there was
Well,
one,
I said
which
to my
one?
knowledge,
there was a positive.
it was positive.
which,
My viewpoint was positive. I mean, seemed like it went on schedule, as Mr. Chief was saying. And a whole lot of that had to do with the architect
Mhm.
moving it along.
Like,
But the
what was it
construction manager,
here,
the construction manager,
Middle school.
it's, you were, I was
which job was it?
trying to answer a question for her that we were talking when you were speaking. Did you say that that was a construction manager here for the middle school? And then I think you all had one as well.
I named a
I
company.
think
so that's why I think
the
Probably says on the
Lancaster
plan.
Elementary may have had one too. I'm not sure.
it's- See, I was thinking we had one everybody's time. I think we've
I'm
had.
not sure because when I was on the board the first time, this we got involved with and got finished. Lancaster Elementary started with the library and did it in phases to not lose the use of facilities, so they did it in phases. They did a library first and then they did another part. And I think that those first two projects that I'm aware of, because they were started when I was on the board, I think those two projects had a construction manager.
You said the
But
high
I
school.
can't
did,
say
and
for
I
sure.
think Lake did. I really.
For
think
sure,
all
I
those
know, I know what the firm was that worked on this.
Yes,
I
that
can
we
name
had
them.
firms.
I won't name them right now. But I would probably recommend that they be, if they're in the process, if we decide to go that way, they would be a good one to be in there.
Kevin,
Subject to Mr. Cheek's interpretation of who it is and what he's had dealings with them in the.
Yeah.
Well, that's been 30 years ago.
The thing that I like here, again, this is my opinion, I like the sound of a construction manager versus a general contractor. Because to me, it seems more specific and to the point. I like the idea of two sets of eyes for what I feel like is a very important investment for the future of Garrard County education. And I don't know whether, like you all, we've given a lot of, not we, you all have given a lot of expert testimony, so to speak, but I feel like in the idea of a construction manager, it seems to me there's greater accountability there.
That's what I was thinking.
And I think that accountability is huge for the success that I feel like our community is entitled to. So to me, you're asking for my opinion, I'm leaning in that direction.
Laying that, Dr. Lamb's got a question.
Well, I'm leaning in that direction too, and that was gonna be my question, because I also had come up with that summary. And I thought that that was right, in that if we have watch me get it wrong again.
Which one?
The general contractor, we're gonna have one contract to sign as a board, and that's gonna be in the selection of our general contractor. But if we were to go with a construction manager, then we're gonna have multiple contracts with multiple entities and more input and accountability there in the work and the quality of the outcome. Am I right in thinking in that direction?
You have multiple contracts,
Multiple contracts.
so you can hold, I want to be point blank. Accountability in construction, when you hold somebody accountable, what that means to me, somebody's not getting paid. You know, they didn't meet the job, they didn't meet the deadline, they're having problems, they're not getting paid. So in a GC project, you're not going to pay the general contractor. Well, he's not going to pay that sub, or he doesn't matter because he's, you know, if the sub's the problem, you know, he's still getting paid. And his, you know, he's still got money there because he's probably not paid the guy for the work that's the problem. So, you know, there's no leverage that you've got specifically with that individual. I have to take that leverage to the general contractor. Your leverage, your accountability on pay, who am I going to cut? I'm going to cut the individual contractor's pay so the other people don't suffer. If you don't pay the general contractor, you're penalizing the whole bunch of subs because none of them are going to get paid. Now what that does, in theory, if I'm the mechanical contractor and my pay got held up, the overall pay of the project got held up, well, I still have to pay the mechanical guy through the schedule of values for what he did. I'm not cutting that, but the general contractor may not be paying any of them anyway because he's a bad general contractor. So there should be some peer pressure in that situation. But does it happen? It all depends upon how it goes down, and I don't have any control there.
Well, I think the financial element of it is very important and may even rise to the top. But I think also the quality of the product at the end of the day is just about as equivalent to the financial accountability. So, you know, so many times a project gets built and completed and paid for and signed off on, and then the teachers walk in the room and they look at it and the projector's in the middle of the, you know, the wall, and there's no way, I mean, it's just the mechanics of the space don't work the way that it was supposed to work. So of these two options, which one gives us the most degree of accountability to ensure that the mechanics of that space that we're building for our students and our teachers and our community, it's going to work the way we want it to work. It's going to look like what we want it to look like and function the way we want it to function. That's the kind of accountability in addition to the dollars that I'm worried about.
Well, let's take that example. Opening day. Were there any teachers in the room there? No teachers? Okay, all teachers. Opening day, you've gone into your room and you're standing there and you're looking at that, and the projector, which we won't have projectors. Let's say there is something's not working. Let's use HVAC. All right? Your HVAC, your open day, Brad calls me up and says, hey, man, you know, it was all working fine. Now it's not. We can't keep so-and-so cool. This teacher's having some problems. The unit keeps zoning out. So who's accountable? Well, I'm going to get the phone call first because nobody calls the CM or the GC first. They call me. So I'm going to turn and I'm going to look at my contract documents and I'm going to find out, okay, is there an issue? Was the unit not there? You know, whatever it may be. I'm going to go to my engineers, CMTA. They're going to go back and they're going to start looking at it and they're going to call it and they'll go out in the field and begin to look at it. Ultimately, though, before it ever got to that point, why did it get to that point?
Yeah, stop it before it
Right,
gets
so
there.
it gets to that point. In a GC, you got the general contractor out there. He's responsible for coordinating those guys. But for whatever reason, he's on the other side of the room. His job site superintendent don't know anything about HVAC. Mechanical contractor took a shortcut. Instead of using a condensate pump, he thought he'd gravity feed it. The condensate pump's clogged. Why did that happen? The contractor didn't do his job. Who's responsible for catching that? Well, that CM should have been able to catch it. That GC should have been able to catch it. The engineer should have caught it. Now you've got in your projects, you're going to have a special inspection agent. So the rebar, if it's a rebar problem, he should have caught it. There are multiple layers in either one of these of people that are your sets of eyes that should be catching this. Ultimately, end of the day, the CM should go back and make that right, or try to get that sub to come back, but it'll fall back, as you said, to Cheek Lane and Sherman Carter Barnhart and the engineers and the commissioning agent who's out there that sort of tested it to get that guy to come back. And how do we do that? If the job has not been fully paid out, I got the leverage. If not, I've got a bond, again, I'm saying bond, that I can go back and contact that bonding company for that mechanical contractor and tell him, you get out here and you get it fixed, or we're going to turn it over to the bonding company because it's within the warranty period.
About 5% that you don't pay out.
You hold that 5%
Oh, 5%.
until final pay. Now, I can't hold it beyond final pay.
You can hold 5% for a year. Here's final pay.
If the contractor has to reach substantial completion and all the punch list items are worked off and he submits a pay application that all work is done in accordance with the plans and specifications, KDE requires that we take that 5% remaining contingency or the remaining retainage and pay that out to close the job out. Now, you all could say we're not going to do that, we're going to hold it, but contract-wise, when they achieve final completion and a certificate of occupancy and we've done our closeout documents, I got to do that, or your contract stays open for a year and you can't access any contingency money you've got left over. So there's some provisions to that. I've never had a owner hold the 5% on the entire project for a period of a year. You may be able to do that in other government.
Maybe things have changed over the years too.
So in essence, it seems to me that you would probably feel better about the project if you had a second set of eyes, because you're responsible at the end of the day, no matter what happens. And so if you had somebody else there to help you oversee the projects, would that not be and that person was reliable and a good CM, would that not help you?
Let me give you an example of where I've seen this work and work the way it should. When it works the way it should, any architect should welcome that second set of eyes, okay? And the reason why is because I got him in the point from day one in the design. He's familiar with the job. He knows why those decisions were made. When you said I didn't want that projector there, he's been involved in that decision. He's looked at the plans, he knows it. And his folks in the field, he's educated them. Look, they got a particular reason why they wanted that projector there. You've moved it to the wrong place. You got to get it fixed. Having them on board for design decisions where they say, you know what, if you'll lower this building a foot or raise this building a foot and your subsoils are there, we can save some money. Oh, wow, we didn't think of that. That's a great idea. That has given us benefit. That has saved money in it when it's done right. It's done right. The guys that look at it and I'll pass it through, that's not doing the job. I want somebody that's going to be just as committed to doing the job as I am. And if I don't have that, I'm going to be not extra. It's going to be more difficult with a general contractor if I get a bad general contractor. So I'm going to have to be more diligent no matter what I do. I just need to know which way you all want to go.
So I think if we were to go with the CM route, then we've got a great deal of work ahead of us to find a good one.
Well,
Yeah, and
the great deal of work, excuse me, Mr. Brown, what I would say a great deal of work is you advertise for the letters of interest. And if you say, well, let's cut that process out, let's go ahead and advertise for interviews. Get your pamphlets out, you select who you want, you set up the interviews immediately, and you move forward. If I know that's the route you're going, I'm not going to lose a step because I'm going to go ahead and create your BG1 without it. See what I'm saying? Because all I have to do then is say, okay, if he's going CM, I will calculate what KDE says the fee schedule should be. I will put that into the BG1 and get the BG1 to KDE and let it go. So it's approved that way. That's the only schedule issue I've got. I can begin work immediately and then have him brought on board as you find out which one's the better fit. Because I really think talking to their past districts that have used it, talking to the ones that have worked with us in those districts, so that you get an opinion of how that team works together. is where you're gonna want your decision to be made from, because I don't sell them, because I work with all of them, but I do have a lot of stake in that, both methods.
Well, and you, go ahead.
Well, if you go with, if you go with general contractor, is the procedure the same? You could go on and advertise, and then you could go on and start work with them as well, or is there a step that would slow us down?
On the general contractor side of it, I just fill out the BG one without the CM value being put in, and you're not gonna go that route, I'm on the same schedule. So it's more steps for you physically, but not in a calendar aspect of it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Well, and I'm gonna be transparent with you. And you said something earlier that you worked with both the general contractor and the construction manager and had success. And here's how I want to be transparent. I want to see something coming up out of the ground as soon as possible.
Right. We all
For me, the reason why I shared my opinion and where I was leaning was the general contractor seemed to be the quickest way to get there. It doesn't mean it's the best way, but I'm just telling you, where I'm coming from. And, but whatever the board decides, and I don't know if the board's gonna be ready to make a decision tonight or not.
But is that accurate? Are we
No.
gonna see something physically coming out of the ground with the GC as opposed to the construction or not?
How
Is that
far are we
accurate?
away from design to actual construction?
we need to get the determination of how we're going to package these together. In other words, as when I met with Mr. Stahl, I'm going to borrow his analogy. You have a certain amount of money. And if you look at that certain amount of money, you all have priorities. And I'm sure each one of you have priorities. Some of those are big chunks of that pie. Okay? So I'm going to change my pie analogy to Mr. Stahl's analogy. We've only got so much money, and we're going to put the big balls, the big rocks in the bucket first and see how far that takes us. And then we're going to fill in the voids with the small ones. So in that analogy, how soon can we start? It's a matter of, I can start immediately once we make that decision. If you told me tonight, Kevin, we want to go ahead and do project A, project B, and project C as our priorities and use these others as the little rocks, they can come later. And it makes sense to bid those in a certain manner, and I'll explain that when you get me your rocks. But if you tell me that today, I can go back and start developing a schedule that gets us to a starting point that makes sense for that high school and the start of school. Because one of the things is, I think I'm not going to speak for you all, but what I've heard is the biggest thing is to get that high school and get that gymnasium. That's the big rock. We want to see that move forward. We want to start ground. We want to go forward. Let's move forward. I know one board member told me he'd like to be somebody said they'd like to be breaking ground in July. Well, we're here. We could break ground. I could break ground tonight if I can get a shovel and a backhoe out there. Doesn't mean construction's going to start. But I could do that because I think that's important. Yeah, we can get a backhoe, we can break some dirt and say, hey, let's have that summer. But that is what's going to determine your schedule, Mr. Browning. I'm not trying to be coy and not avoid that.
No, I
And
know.
once I know what the work is, I can say it's going to take us X long to get things done and packaged out and out to bid.
I have one more question. Well, probably one more, but all right, I want to summarize the number of pairs of eyes that we're going to have with each. So with a construction manager, so first of all, we're going to have your set of eyes. So I'm going to put down cheek. All right, and then we're going to have a construction manager set of eyes. We're going to have a job site supervisor set of eyes. We're going to have a project manager set of eyes, and we're going to have our people too. Probably, let's just say, right, we'll have somebody representing the district. So we'll have all those sets of eyes under construction manager. Was that wrong or right? Was it?
That is only a portion.
Well, okay. For the top part, we really
Okay.
a lot underneath here,
Good.
but just for the tip top.
Mhm.
Okay, and the construction manager would actually be involved in the design process.
Yes.
So we would have another set of eyes in the design process. Okay, now if we go with the GC, we're gonna have you.
Mhm.
we're gonna have a general contractor,
Mhm.
we're gonna have a job site
Mhm.
supervisor, and we're gonna have a site supervisor or not,
Got a job site supervisor, no project manager.
no project man. So we're minus a set of eyes there. So we're one short and we're not involved in the
In the design
design.
process, and you're subject more so to the low bid. Because it's a little more difficult to get rid of that general contractor if he's a bad general contractor.
That in and of itself bothers me because low bid is not always quality bid. You end up with the project not
Now-
turning out the way you wanted it to.
And we can
Stuck
go
with
through
it.
it, and you can go through that. I don't want to make you think you can't deal with that, but you can go through that, but your board attorney is going to weigh in pretty heavily in that for that general contractor of being able to bypass him or go to the next bidder or reject his bid. You
But
got to
that's
really show
something-
something substantial. It can't be here.
That's something we can push across to that, let's say, general contractor. When those bids come out, we're after, obviously, the lowest bid, to save money, but we're after a quality bid, and we don't want us to wind up with something that's gonna be a detriment.
Mhm.
I mean, they would focus on that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and what I would do, I've kicked this around long enough, and because it's you all, I'm gonna go to KDE with this. I would request that we consider making this a pre-qualified or a scoring matrix for the selection of the general contractor. If you go that method, what I would do is put in there, proximity to the job site, have them list the number of jobs they've got, years of experience doing this type of job, who's going to be on staff and the years of experience with them. I would develop a scoring matrix that they would have to fill out and submit with a bid so that we can get more information about who they're going to have on that job than just by calling up 12 references and the architects they worked with and so forth. That would give you more flexibility in rejecting that bidder that you have a question about or uncomfortable with by doing it with a scoring matrix. It's not pre-qualifying the bids because KDE won't let us do that, but they will let us do a scoring matrix.
May not matter, but in some situations, you have individuals out there who function as either one of these. Is that correct?
You are correct. Let me go through the list. Codell Construction does not do general construction. Trace Creek is a construction manager. They do general construction. Alliance does both construction manager and general construction. Branscombe does both of those. And I'm just going through the long list of CMs. Hacker Brothers, does work in Laurel County and so forth. They do both. In fact, they've done CM work and now got the general trades. So, they bid it as they did the CM work, bid it, and Walker ended up doing it. Pax Walker, they do both, which is another CM. Let's see if I'm missing any. DW Wilburn does not do CM. They're just a GC. I think right there, Ketchum Alliance, Codell, Pax Walker, Hacker Brothers. Am I missing one? Branscombe, I got Branscombe. I think I pretty much got all of them.
Well, we use Branscombe as our construction manager on the new high school.
Mhm.
It's how many years old now?
Okay,
13, 14.
so it sounds as if we have a construction manager that is not really, we feel, listening to us or working with us in a positive manner, that we do have a company that we can go to and say, things aren't working well. We could have someone that we could run interference for us, possibly, no? And then the same thing with the general contract. I mean, they're not the end all. We do have someone else that we could go to.
And then general contractors that will bid on the jobs, but there's subs because the construction manager too.
I'm a little
Trying to
bit,
figure out how many on average general contractors bid on these school projects around here? About the ones you named or?
for general contractors or CMs. General contractors right now, depending upon when this bids and what the availability is, because labor's so short, will be a challenge and we'll be digging for that. Okay? Because you just don't know where they're at. There's not a lot of work, but there's some work coming out and everybody's getting busy. The general contractors that I've talked to and the CMs that are general contractors, The problem is finding the labor. It's not them that's the problem, it's finding HVAC guys, finding plumbing guys to bid the work, and that sort of thing. So, and I've got a whole slide that was later on down the list that we could talk about what is the impact to your budget more specifically and how I'd handle these BG ones at this stage of the game. But, you know, your question, I'm having difficulty following, so I want to make sure, can you restate that again one more
Well, I'm
time?
just concerned, I think from what I was hearing is that, so by working with construction managers, there were some negative, relationships or not being listened, ideas were not considered that were suggested.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming that was construction manager. So I was just saying, if you have that situation and you don't feel that you're working with them in a positive way, is there someone that you can speak with and say, this is not working real well? Can you help us walk through this? Or is that, do we do that on our own? And I guess I was thinking with the construction manager, you would have maybe someone you could go to, but it sounds like with the general contractor, it sounds like to me they're employed by these companies as well.
Yeah,
I was thinking
what you
that-
have is a CM. A CM will bid out the general trades.
Yes.
So don't, you know, that may be getting you confused. A CM has the general trades.
No,
The general trades is a contract, is a general contract.
So let me see if I can.
I think I'm
let me
still
see if I
thinking,
can paraphrase,
Yeah.
if I'm following. When we hire a construction manager, if we go that route, and something's not working well with the individual on site,
yes, you can go up the ladder.
we can go and say,
Yes,
can we have a
you're correct.
different person here? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
So, and what if it's a general contractor? Can you go up the ladder? I guess up the ladder was what I was like.
You can ask the general contractor to change the job site guy, but your contractor is in for construction. You may get a change, you may not get a change. You may get a change for the worst, you don't know. CM is probably gonna be more, he's working for you. Put it in my shoes, and I've had this happen. Look, we really don't like the contract administrator that you've got, Kevin, working on the job. Can you change him? I change him out. If you don't like the engineer, I've done that yet this morning I had a conversation with an owner, another district. He said, you know what? You're ready to start this job. And I said, yep, I know. And that engineer, the specific plumbing engineer from that firm, isn't gonna be on the job. I had the conversation with Deb and said, don't bring that guy back. You know? So, you know, you have that ability. CM, they should be able to change it. That's what they did in Floyd County. They changed it.
I'd ask each board member to make out a list,
Hmm?
you know, facility plan, and I'll just give you mine right now.
Okay.
I like the idea of the combination football, soccer, band, and 8-lane running track, you know, all in one. Remember we talked about that when we interviewed?
Yep.
Number 2 was gymnasium. Then I just lumped all the renovations that are needed, all our buildings together for number 3, and then the sports complex, I think that was the tennis court and what else?
Softball, baseball.
Softball, baseball, and
Tennis.
then number 5 was bus garage. Those are mine. Do y'all have yours with you? Or do you have an order of y'all?
Well, mine was the gymnasium first, which we talked about in our discussions, that it would include a track, a walking track or running track around it, and then whatever else additional we want,
3,500 seat.
at least 3,500 seats in it. And then additionally go to the football, track, soccer complex. And my third one was actually the bus garage. My third one. And then after that, get into the any renovation projects we need, and go from there and see what kind of money. And actually, I think that's where you can help us, is come in and say, okay, this is your bonding capability. This is how much each one of these are going to cost. And if you were to do this, this, and this, that'd actually give me a better
Yeah, we can do this much.
visualization.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I was talking about earlier, since we're, you know, I wanted to be respectful of time, but I'm showing this again, and the only reason why I'm showing this was kind of difficult for you all to follow because I did it by percentage. But what I would do is come back here and do this with the actual dollars for that. All right? And I would base those dollars off of current KDE. In other words, the high school, instead of saying 30%, I would give you the dollars. Okay? So that you can see each one of those costs. That gives you those priorities and gives you those dollar numbers for each one of those. All right? What I would utilize for that, because the market right now is so volatile, we don't know, we can't predict what it's going to be by the time we bid. Contractors are telling us, for instance, steel contractors are not even giving them prices on certain components of steel until it's bid day because they don't know and they're afraid to take that liability on. So the contractors are trying to deal with that issue. So what we're saying is at this stage of the game, KDE has just released a 2001 cost opinion of what they think the cost should be for new construction. And you can see here, I will utilize those numbers for that new construction number because I think that gives us something that we can do a basis off of this is where we're at right now to do those BG1s and do that assessment. But if you're going to say, Kevin, what's it going to cost out when we bid it? Nobody, we've got to be patient with this. This market, nobody's encountered a market like this. You saw just that's the first time I've heard that security had gone up 50% by the end of July. You know, steel has gone up. It was $4,000 to $4,500 pre-COVID per ton. It's now up to $8,000, $9,000. I heard a price the other day that it's going to be hitting $10,000 short a ton. So, you know, the numbers here, the reason why I did the percentages, because the percentages aren't going to change. If all the numbers go up, they all go up. So I was trying to do it based off percentage because that was my logic, is I can't tell you within any accuracy other than by using their numbers that KDE says right now. So that's the way I will base your wish list. You've got the priorities. You give me the priorities, I'll assign the values to them, and I'll come back to you and be very clear and concise and say, look, your 20 million cuts off here. Now pick from the list which ones you want to do to be able to do it. And what I would do is bid those based upon the logic. Okay, when I say logic is BG1 for the high school would include a price for the football field, which, you know, if that's part of it. Any work that's going on at the high school would be one BG1. And I would do an alternate if you think, well, that's a lower priority, because then that gives you the flexibility. If that comes in on number and we're right on our numbers and the numbers are good, you can accept that alternate and you can evaluate it where you are with the next set of rocks, you know, the next lower priorities. Now let's get that one out. I can continue to work on all of them at the same time, but I want to bid the big rocks first to see how far it bites into your budget. Because the one thing you don't want to do is promise this community that we're going to do everything and then we can't follow through with that. I'd rather take these steps so that everybody knows the expectations. These are our top three. We want to do these things.
So your cost estimates that you have up there don't show an estimate for a field.
Right.
Like we were talking about, or gym.
Right.
Or the ideas of renovations.
Right.
How do those calculate?
Let me tell you how that calculates. On the high school, they're saying $274 a square foot. That's for new construction. That includes a gym in high school. I would use that number to calculate your gym. Okay? So if you took that number right now and took well, you don't have the total square footage. You have to look up what 3,500 square feet, how big that ends up being.
No, with the seat 3,500, I don't know how many square feet.
That's what I'd have to do. I'd have to see. We've got some that have seated that much. I just need to go back and see those square footages. So I would take the square footage, and if you look at your BG1, there was a number in there on that BG1. Let me flip over to that. And that's the number I would use starting out, because your gymnasium was, and you can see here, 16,000 square feet. So if you take 16,000 square feet times that, and I see Mr. Stowe's got his calculator out, that cost per square foot, you know, it may come in less than that. But right now, I don't know, not with this market like it is.
Well, and that gym is not the 3,500. That gym here on our facilities plan is the one that the KD.
Yeah, it's like 1,600.
Yeah, it matches enrollment.
Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
not match
There you go.
desire.
There you go. And that's the other portion of this. The districts that have done these very large gyms have had to put local money in it. You know, that's the way they got that done. They came up with another bonding source or came up with some money they transferred over from leftover contingency or capital funds request transfers, that sort of thing, to make those happen. So if we're gonna do a 3,500 square foot gym, the first thing we gotta do is get KDE on board with that. So I've got to do some legwork at KDE and look at what your program is at your high school. Because I need to analyze that program to see where you're at in regards to the regular KDE program.
So I believe when we get to that point, this board, we want to be involved in that process along with the Bay Area.
That's right. They need
To have that conversation with Katie.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
Well, thank you. And that's when we would go to KDE and make our case.
That's right. We have to have that meeting right off the bat.
So you said the 279 is what you would use for calculating the gym, or the 278, whatever that number was. What are you going to use for calculating?
Renovation?
No, first, the field
track?
area and that kind of stuff.
There is no KDE number for that. We'll look at our most recent bids on those and try to do some projections for what that is. We're doing some work in Russell County right now with a contract with a Doug Gooch with AGE. I don't know if you know him or not, a civil engineer that's working with us in Russell. We'll get new numbers on the tracks and tell you what those are. And the same way the football fields and turf fields, there's not as much of that impact that we're seeing in the marketplace for some of those site event type places. You know, your small masonry type field houses, they're not seeing that escalation. It's concrete block. And probably do those out of light gauge trusses as opposed to wood now. Wood's coming back down, luckily.
So let's go then to the one that you threw out, and I said no. How do you use the renovation side? Do you use the construction cost for that?
What I do is I take the 80% right now, 80% of that. Now, I'll look at that and evaluate if I think that's way over. You know, if you're doing something like windows, I'm not going to use that number. That I'll do a takeoff on and try to get those as close as we can based on current market.
So not my place to do this, but I would assume that what the board would like to have is the best guesses right now
Yeah.
on each of those projects.
Okay.
Not to hold anybody.
Right. So the best guess on that gym, the best guess on that athletic facility, the best guess on roofs and the locations, the best guess on the work at Lancaster, the best guess on a middle school.
Yes.
You know, pieces like that. And we, if the board is okay, we can help define what those pieces are if that's necessary. But I think that would be important for you all to have to start.
Because what I'm assuming,
prioritizing.
And it's 16,000 square feet is for 1,600 seat.
It's not, that,
Minimum.
it wasn't 1,600 seats. It's only like, if my memory serves me correct, that was only like 1,250 seats, and it's based on the
On
enrollment.
16,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Well, let's say you double that.
Well, don't do that math on my memory, please.
Well, no, I'm just
I
saying.
can do it.
So,
I'm just-
so
Here, let me-
32,000
It's
square
irrelevant.
feet for double the occupancy, almost $9 million.
Yeah, I think it's an irrelevant point for tonight's discussion.
Oh, I know, but I just,
But I think we have those, if we have the cost of both, of course, the ideal choice would be able to do them both at the same time, of course, but we want to be able to do renovations and the other.
that's right,
We'd like to be able to touch
every building.
every building.
And so I believe that's where you could make the decision about how many of the big rocks you can do to leave the small rocks that can fit in around it. So that's why I think you look big first, make sure you know what you can do there, and then work around that. And if you can do 3 bigs, then you do. If you can't, you go back to 2.
Exactly.
So
well, let me ask the board, are y'all ready to make a decision on whether to go general contractor or construction manager? I've got a sense that the majority of the board is leaning toward construction manager. Just from listening to you all.
I don't know about the rest of them, I'm ready to vote on it. Listen to, I don't know sure how much more we can beat the egg right now.
Ms. Davis, you had enough discussion?
I sort of came in with the idea of going to general contract the way you said, but I think after some of the things we've talked about, I sort of like the idea of having an extra set of eyes, and also like the idea of having some involvement in the design phase. But I also would want to have the assurance that if things weren't going well, that we have an avenue to pursue, that we have a good working relationship.
I like the idea of the extra set of eyes and the accountability. I do not want to make the decision to go with a construction manager and then cut that process of selection short in any way. So I don't want to just jump through hoops and say this is the person. I want us to be very diligent in selection of that person and do it carefully. And if that takes time, then I want the board committed to make that happen.
I can be
Carefully.
patient.
I know you can, because you have been with me. But it sounds as if we can do that, and you could go on and start
Yes.
giving us some numbers, so that would not slow us down.
That's exactly
So I
right.
think the BG1 is in the offing after you know which way we're trying to go. Is that correct?
The BG1, if you say tonight, we're gonna go GC or CM, I'll be able to start working on the numbers. Because I think it's more important for me to get the right numbers in front of you before we do the BG1. But that's not gonna slow us up from having the CM, okay? The beauty of it is when you get the CM on board, if you go that route, then we got a second set of eyes that's also looking at those cost numbers.
Mr. McCray, I've heard from you.
I'm going to go with the majority of the board. And I really,
I'm ready to make a motion.
I'm ready to vote.
You ready?
So-
All right. I'll entertain a motion right now then to go with construction manager or general contractor.
I make a motion, we go with the construction manager.
Okay, the motion, Mr. Hurst to go with construction manager. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. McCray, second. All in favor, let it be known by lifted hand. All opposed? All board members in favor, we go with construction manager.
Now, let's talk,
Stay. I'm right there with you.
But now you wanted discussion and we've had.
Yes, and thank you.
Right, I also
Discussion.
well, I really appreciate you all having this level of discussion because it needs to be a discussion
You
you all
heard
do.
priorities from 2 board members,
Yes.
but there's 3 that did not.
That's right. I
So
like
I would
that.
like to
I'm
have an
ready.
opportunity for those that
Yeah.
did not to share.
Can I back up just a little bit?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Browning, you went so fast, I didn't get yours wrote down. I've got 4 priorities for Mr. Hurt, but I didn't get all yours wrote down in the right order. So let's go back to yours.
So I had the combination football, soccer, band, 8-lane running track, all in one, the gymnasium, the reservation, or the needed renovations in all the buildings, and the sports complex and the bus garage.
Okay.
Well, not this,
Oh,
well,
That's his priority list.
That's my priority
Priorities in
list.
order.
yes, in that order, that's what I'm saying, priorities.
So what was your number 5? You gave me gymnasium track with the inside interior track and 3,500 seats, priority 1. Football and the outdoor track, soccer field,
All that
Band.
together,
that's another one, that's priority 2.
yes.
and bus garage.
Priority 3 was bus
Number
garage,
3,
and renovations were 4.
renovations, number 4,
What was number 5?
and to, if we have the available monies to finish the rest of the wish list. That'd be tennis courts,
Okay.
softball, baseball.
What you're calling the sports complex.
Yeah,
If I use the right, same term between you, that'd be great.
so,
It's your turn.
Oh, boy. Number 1 priority, we had meetings and everything, and, the track, soccer, combo, track soccer, football. That's my number 1. Number 2 is the bus garage. Number 3 is gym. Number 4, actually, I would just go with 4 because I think we need to do, with money's left over and available, we need to do as much as we can into the other projects around the schools. Need to work here, whatever we've got, kind of spread it out. Do what we can with what we've got, the most bang for the buck, which these priorities may change a little bit as we get into them and look at them. And I'm amenable, so I think agreeable to amend mine to make it whatever will fit best for the district.
Yes.
So I was hopeful that we could lump all the projects at the high school into one and let that be our number one and just finish our high school. But clearly, I didn't get it.
Well, that
Platform
would
to
be,
say that.
that would be my number
But-
one. I could go with that.
Yeah, so for me, having that combination football, soccer, band, and the run and track, that was the priority from our community forums that we had. And so I want to support the community input and say, that is our number one project. Did that be the one and only that we can do? That's my number one. My second is the gymnasium because it has the potential to also touch the entire community. And then, this, what Mr. Browning's called the sports complex with the baseball, tennis, and softball. I think I need to put that as my number 3. And then anything that is left over, let it be put into needed renovations in all of our other buildings. That would finish our high school for our community, and it would, if there's anything left over, then we could put new windows in at Lancaster Elementary or replace a roof that needs to be replaced. And then I think long-term, looking out past these projects, we look at, the bus garage and ATC and that. So that would be that is my order.
Thank you. And if you would,
Ms. Davis has-
is everybody, oh, I'm sorry.
A lot of my reasoning is the same as Dr. Lamb. I also, based on the comments that were made at our meetings, I also would be in favor of the combination of soccer, band, track, field first. My second would be the gym. And then and then as those are designed, I do want to keep in mind that the original drawing at the high school had an auditorium. So I hope that we can work, as we enlarge the gym, I hope we don't lose sight of the vision that maybe someday we could have an auditorium there as well. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
And so the gym would be second. Third would be the renovations. I think our other buildings are in need of some tender loving care and get them up to snuff. My fourth would be the sports complex at the high school. I would like to see the high school finished, but still leaning on trying to work with our other schools at this point because I think even though our playing facilities, our softball and baseball are maybe not ideal, but they're workable right now, and getting this turf field would be helpful. And then the bus garage, based on what we heard at the meetings, that was not a real high priority, and they preferred some of these others. So unless I've misunderstood their interpretation, I would put that last. I think there's some other thoughts on the bus garage that we might want to talk about as well. So that's why I would put it last at this point.
Okay.
And as Mike
It's
said,
not a
there
high
could be,
priority because it was placed there because it had to be placed there by the KDE rules. That was why it's placed as not, because it wasn't directly
well, but
affected.
even in the community conversations,
Oh, yeah, I had conversations in the bus garage, people said, hey, if all we can get is the gym, forget the bus garage, we'd rather see the
yeah,
gym.
or get, well, they don't see the
It's
field,
what, but
unless they could get a
I'd
road,
like to
if
see
they
it.
wanted the road. So,
My conversations with bus drivers, you don't get as much as you can,
Oh, yeah.
but now if you look at the building, you go down there and look at the building, what they're working under, and the conditions they're working under. I don't want to be responsible if something bad happens.
well, and we can adjust these.
Yeah.
And so,
The worst shaped building in we've got in the whole district.
so can you, from our conversation
Yep.
tonight, and pick out the big rocks?
Yep.
And see what we can get.
Here's what I plan to do. Sitting here, I think each one of you, I want to do a priority. I'll do each one of you your own individual priorities and show those listed, and I'll draw a red line at where the priority stops. Okay? So you can see based upon your own perspective how far that money's going, because I think that's going to define your big rocks.
Yeah.
And that'll show you sort of that. So, you might get, because you started out with the track and the bus garage and the gym and the renovations, you may get 4 items. And you left off track, bus garage, gym. Okay. You might get those 3 and have money left over, where somebody else may get the 3 and not have any money left over. So I think it'd be good for you to see it in that venue, if that's okay with the board, and everybody. I think that's a good way to see it.
That sounds okay, but at the same time, I would additionally to that like to see just each piece of.
It will be. Each piece of those will be broke out separate, Mr. Kerr. I didn't say it that way, but what my point is every one of your priorities to be listed out beside your item number one. It's going to be a dollar figure, beside your number two, number three. And as you go down your list, see how far you go before you get to that 20 million. Now, what you're going to see is my number is going to take 20 million and take 80% or 20% off of that, because that's soft cost. And I'll just take it off the top because you're really not working with 20. You're working with construction cost numbers, not total project cost numbers. So, 20 million is your max. I got to get down to a workable number for your construction cost, and that's 20% off of that. May come in a little less, but usually we see anywhere from 15 to 20. Let's just show 20 to be safe.
And, I can't speak for the rest of the board, only for myself, but I almost feel that each one of us, we give you a wish list.
Yep.
But our real wish list is for Garrard County.
That's right.
And I think each one of us are willing to do whatever necessary to make the best thing happen for Garrard County, whatever order it's in.
That's right. And that's why I want to show you each individual order, because I think it's just good for conversation.
And in each one of our town hall meetings that we had, we let all the people know that we weren't going to be able to do everything.
That's right.
If it so happened that we could, great. But we were going to get everything we possibly could without putting an extra burden on our taxpayers,
I agree.
without raising taxes. And that was a promise we made to the people, and we won't stick to that.
We also promised that we would work together as a board to achieve that. And so I
Yes.
think we've demonstrated that tonight very well,
Yes.
that we haven't rushed. We've been very cautious and deliberate and respectful of each other. And I think that's something that is worth mentioning, is that we are working to ensure that that does happen. That we do give our district the very best that we can.
Yes,
From
and
this spot.
hopefully people listening tonight will see that we care tremendously and that it is a process and it does take time. People are excited. They're saying, are we getting the field? Are we getting they're excited
Oh,
to know what's happening and when it's going to happen. And we're working as hard and fast as we can because we want it as bad as the people asking questions. So we still want to take feedback. So people still want to make contact and share their thoughts
Oh,
and
yeah,
feelings.
just
But we're still interested in hearing what people are saying and
If
just
people
know
are
that
still
we're.
up at this hour and watching this,
Yes,
if
but
they want to give us
it is a
feedback,
long process.
we will.
And money can only be used in certain ways. That's the other thing. It's like, we have this money to use for construction. So we have to make sure that we use the money very wisely. And it goes as far as it can go. And I think we're all, as Dr. Glenn said, we're committed to doing
That's right.
that as a board.
All right. Anything else?
The only thing I would ask is probably at maybe the August board meeting, try to get these numbers back to you to keep the ball rolling.
We start construction
We're
by
soon.
end of the month.
Well, we can get a backhoe out there and I'll dig if I have to. It seems like after tonight, I'm accountable for everything anyway.
So I'll put you first.
But if I can throw out one thought here, since this was an early, as far as the timing, if he had something prior to that board meeting, would everybody be okay with a special call meeting to get that
Yeah.
information a little bit quicker?
Yes.
Which might lead to then a response that you can give at the next board meeting. So if you all are comfortable with it, I'll just stay in contact with Mr. Cheek, and as he gets something to that spot, he feels like he can come back in, give you some information, then I would approach you about
No
possibly
pressure.
doing that.
No pressure. See how fast you are.
I think everybody here is in agreement for more frequent board meetings if that is going to get the process along.
Our goal is to move it as fast as possible,
Yes.
get you where you need to be. But I appreciate the consideration for being as attentive to, the process is a process, and I don't want to shortcut it because ultimately I'm trying to look out for your best interest.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
And I didn't get through my whole agenda, so just so you know, I only got one item on
You
it.
went through the whole agenda?
No, I only got one item on my agenda, that's good.
Oh,
I'm gonna bring my dinner to the next one. The looks of your agenda.
Hey, I've been known to bring pizza to these, so, you know, if you want me to, I'll do it.
but I've told the board, that, and we actually, I've had a conversation with one or two of you about the possibility of doing away with our working session on Mondays, and we meet on Fridays, because we're gonna have some special call meetings throughout this process, so.
Then again, we could keep them both open, and that one of them could be the special call meeting.
Yeah, keep that hour.
So I would think maybe what you want to think about though is moving it out of that same week, which could give you the ability to meet more frequently without it being stacked within 3 days of each other. So, you know,
That's what I
actually,
thought
it's going to
of.
be my recommendation in the August meeting was to consider suspending the Monday meeting and looking at how you use that for a special call meeting
Yeah.
within the month.
I really think that's wise, because that gives us flexibility for design. There's an issue even in construction that comes up, and we need to have a work session and then take action again. It gives you a little buffer there, because you may say, go back and rework something and come back to the board with it at the board meeting. So it gives me a little time in between those meetings to do that. That's
Thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Oh, love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Love this opportunity.
We've got your phone number, and we know. where
You
you
know
live.
where I live now. Look for cheap lane. You can't miss it. Only driveway with a street anymore.
All right. Well, we've got some things accomplished tonight, I think, but we need to go into executive session right now. So, would somebody make a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make a motion that we move into executive session.
Dr. Lamb made the motion, do I have a second?
Second it.
Ms. Davis seconded, all in favor, let me know, raise your hand. Thank you, we are in executive session. See ya.